Hello, everyone, and welcome to FCC's virtual event, Women at the Heart of Agricultural Wellbeing. I'm your host today, Caitlin Dubin, and I am so excited to be here with you today. I myself am a grain farmer from Southern Alberta. I'm a storyteller and a community builder. I have had the absolute privilege of celebrating the stories of women in agriculture through my podcast, the Rural Woman Podcast, since 2019. Today, we are bringing you the last episode from our online women series, and I could not be more excited. I would like to thank you all for joining us here today, and a happy belated International Women's Day to you all. We are going to spend the next hour together, and today you are going to hear from Dr. Briana Hagan, who will be discussing how mental health stress impacts farmers and what we can do to lift women up. While today's session is being delivered virtually, wherever we find ourselves in Canada, we are on traditional Indigenous territories, which are rich with traditional stories and histories that we have an opportunity to be curious about and to honor. This recognition is more than an acknowledgement of territory. It is about recognizing Indigenous people across Canada as the original caretakers of the land that we are so lucky to work, live, and honor, to respect the diversity and strength of all Indigenous peoples across Canada. May we learn and unlearn. Before I introduce you to our keynote speaker, Dr. Briana Hagan, there is a little housekeeping. This session will be recorded and a link will be sent out to everyone who is registered. So if you must sneak away or you want to share this with your family or friends, that will be available in your inbox in a few days. If you have any technical questions, there is a blue support button on the lower part of your screen. Just click on there and ask any of your questions. And as you may have noticed, there is a chat box in our right-hand side of your screen. Drop a hello in there and let us know where you're dialing in from today. Beside the chat, there is a Q&A box, so feel free to ask any questions you have in there, and we will get to as many questions as we can at the end of the presentation, and your question can be anonymous. Now, let me introduce you to our keynote speaker, Dr. Briana Hagan. Briana is the CEO and lead scientist for the Canadian Centre of Agricultural Wellbeing. Using both survey and qualitative data, she examined how farmers and their farms are impacted by mental health outcomes, with a focus on perceived stress and the barriers and facilitators of help seeking for farmers. Dr. Hagan is passionate about collaborative research approaches and building strong partnerships with the agriculture community to co-design research projects and mental health programming. Please help me welcome Dr. Briana Hagan to the stage. Hello, Briana.
Hi.
Welcome. Take it away.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for having me. Good morning, good afternoon, depending where you are, and a belated happy International Women's Day to everybody. I am honored to be here among many strong, resilient women and men in agriculture. As Caitlin mentioned, my name is Briana Hagan, and I am the CEO and lead scientist at the Canadian Centre for Agricultural Wellbeing, or CCAW for short. Today, I want to share not just what we're doing at CCAW, particularly for women in ag, but why it matters. To do that, I kind of want to take a step back and go a little bit behind the scenes and talk about how I got here and how someone like me who didn't grow up on a farm ended up dedicating my career to supporting farmers' mental health. My academic path began in public health in Winnipeg, where I'm from. From there, I earned a Master's of Science in Community Health and Epidemiology at the University of Saskatchewan, and then I pursued a PhD in Population Medicine and Epidemiology at the University of Guelph, focusing on farmer mental health specifically. Early on this path, I was not convinced that I belonged in ag research. I did not come from a farming family, and I felt hesitant about stepping into a field that was so deeply cultural. But at the beginning of my PhD, my advisor, Dr. Andrea Jones at U of G, really encouraged me to explore that and talk directly with farmers and to listen. So I did that. I went out to barns and fields and kitchens. I asked farmers about their days, their stressors, their triumphs. And while I could bring research training in, I really found that the farmers taught me and were very willing to teach me about what ag context and culture really meant. Over time, I realized that my specific skill set in epidemiology and data and translating evidence into accessible action could really fill a gap here. Farmers were telling me stories of burnout, of not being understood, of the mental load they carried in silence, and they needed something to be built with them. That's how I moved from being solely a researcher to also becoming an advocate, from collecting and analyzing data to developing these evidence based programs. So, my own path has always been really grounded in humility. I'm not here to fix, but to help co create, to build something that holds stories, struggles, and strength of farm people high, especially the women who hold so many roles on the farm. I stepped into this role leading CCAW with the goal of keeping the research human. Every program we've built since then starts the same way that that research did, sitting down with farmers, asking questions, and co creating the answers. Leading CCAW wasn't just about managing projects, it's about carrying forward a community's trust and making sure that no farmer, and especially no women in agriculture, feels like they have to do this alone. So back in 2016, the National Survey on Farmer Mental Health, conducted by Dr. Jones, myself, and the team at the University of Guelph, revealed alarming prevalences of stress, burnout, and suicidal ideation among Canadian farmers. The first evidence-based look at well-being in agriculture in Canada, and this study was a turning point. We'd heard stories for years of exhaustion and overwhelm, the constant sense that there's never enough time, money, or margin for error. But until 2016, no one had measured what that looked like on a national scale quantitatively. Our survey in 2016, and then again repeated in 2021, showed that nearly 3/4 of farmers were living with moderate to high stress. Almost half said that they would not reach out for help because of the stigma or lack of access. And perhaps the most sobering, 1 in 4 farmers thought about taking their own life in the previous year. It was a moment that really stopped us there. For me, this wasn't just data. These are people I'd sat with at tables, people who said, you probably can't use this in your research, but I'm actually not okay. The study gave those voices credibility. It turned whispered stories into national headlines. It was cited in Parliament, discussed at industry meetings, and shared in farm papers across the country. But something was missing. The numbers told us farmers were struggling. They didn't tell us how that struggle was experienced differently, especially for women. That's what the next study began to uncover. So this research, which was part of my doctoral work and soon to be published, focused specifically on the lived experiences of women who farm in Canada. What we found was consistent and clear. Gender shapes well-being, not just emotionally, but also structurally. Across identity, workload, and access to support, farm women described carrying burdens that were invisible, normalized, and often dismissed. This isn't about blaming agriculture as an industry. It's about naming patterns that we can then change. Right, there we go. One of the clearest findings here was about identity. Women are doing equal and often primary farm work, and yet the default image of a farmer is still of a man. When we use masculine generics and say it includes everybody, research shows that people still imagine a man. So when a woman says she doesn't feel like she counts, that isn't an insecurity. This is cumulative messaging. Belonging is not symbolic, it's psychological safety. We cannot improve farmer well-being while quietly reinforcing who looks like a real farmer. Language isn't always neutral, it signals value. So we really need to make sure that we're cognizant of that when we use these things to design agricultural campaigns, posters, workshops, or anything related to the industry, it's something that we can all contribute to and do better at. Farm women in this study described what we're calling cognitive labor, the constant thinking work on the farm, tracking, anticipating, coordinating, remembering. One participant described it simply as, "My head can only hold so much." In some interviews, this labor was referred to as background noise. But background noise is someone else's burnout. When women take on more income generating farm roles without a redistribution of unpaid labor that they currently contribute, the mental load for them compounds. We heard this over and over again. And this isn't about an ideology, it's about capacity for these women. You cannot expand responsibility without expanding supports. And yet, many women in this study still questioned whether they were even doing enough in their farm role, in their role as a mother, a partner, whether their contributions were considered meaningful. One of the most troubling patterns we observed was this. When men suggested that women should be the ones who attend mental health workshops, that they were better suited to do that, it was often so that they could bring that knowledge back home and carry that additional workload again, so that they could help their partners, their husbands, their families, so that they could monitor their family for mental health struggles, so that they could intervene and know what to do, so that they could carry it. That expectation has a name, and that's called kin keeping. Women become the emotional coordinators of the farm. But there's a tension there. Farm women in Canada reported poorer mental health outcomes compared to men in Canada in our survey. And yet they are the ones positioned as caretakers of everyone else. Support cannot become another invisible responsibility for women on the farm. At some point, we all have to ask, okay, well, who's holding her? Who's taking care of women who farm? That question is not rhetorical. It's a bit of a call to action for us in our industry to be mindful of this data, be mindful of the fact that women also need supports. In every province that I've visited, I've heard similar themes and stories. Farmers, both men and women, tell me, I don't have time to be unwell. I do not have time for my mental health to be waning. They work through exhaustion, through uncertainty, through loss, because stopping feels impossible and like not something that is an option to any of them. The barriers aren't just about access to care, though that is a big one, and we're going to talk about that more later, especially in rural and remote areas. It's also about culture and farm culture. Farming has always been tied to identity, hard work, independence, resilience, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Those are all incredible strengths in agriculture, but they can also make it really hard for folks to say, I need help during a mental health struggle. And for women in agriculture, those pressures can feel even harder. They are running businesses, managing books, caring for children or aging parents, volunteering at in their communities, and still feeling like they should be able to hold it all together, not only for themselves, but for their families. And it feels like a failure if any of those are going wrong. I can't tell you how many times I have had a woman approach me, pull me aside after a talk and say, I don't know how to stop or how to ask for help. I don't know what to do if I'm struggling. What does that even look like? What does that feel like? And that's the reality that we're kind of up against when we're tackling farmer mental health in Canada. I really want to emphasize that these are not individual failings or individual feelings. These are real structural issues across access, stigma, and expectation when it comes to farmer mental health. And until we can name those things, we can't really change them. That's why at CCAW, every program that we develop starts from a place of empathy and reality. We meet farmers where they are, not where a system really assumes that they should be. Now, some of that can feel a little bit doom and gloom, and that's not what I want this session to be about. I want to take some time to move from some of that hard stuff to talk about some of the positives that have come from all of this work and all of this research that has been going into the community and the community building that's happened. So I'm going to take some time to highlight our programs and see how we're supporting our women and men in agriculture. So, all of this research that we did and all of this community building and consultation that we did went into building services for men and women who farm. We wanted to build something that felt real and not overly academic. So that led us to In the Know. In the Know started around a table with farmers, mental health professionals, and community members. We asked, what would make mental health easier to talk about? What would help you feel a little bit more confident to talk about it and to recognize signs and symptoms in yourself? We conducted both qualitative and quantitative research here, put the pieces together to create an evidence-based approach to mental health literacy for farmers in Canada. We piloted it, and the result was a free 4-hour workshop led by ag literate facilitators. In the Know itself covers topics like stress, depression, anxiety, and substance use, and suicide, but through stories that could have happened on any farm road in Canada. While there were other mental health literacy programs that existed, they did not seem to hit the mark when it came to understanding farm culture and understanding how we could convey this information in a way that's digestible and usable for folks who farm and folks who work with farmers on a day-to-day basis. So it provides those who take it another tool in their tool belt to increase their confidence in talking about their own and others' mental health in a way that feels very safe and effective. How many times have you heard someone say, I knew something was wrong, but I did not want to make it worse? In the Know is a program to address exactly that sentiment for folks, so we can all feel more comfortable and safe talking about mental health. One of my favorite parts of In the Know is seeing women walk in or come into that virtual room thinking they're there solely to help others and walk out realizing that they really actually needed this too. I've had women tell us, now I know how to talk to my partner about burnout. I know how to recognize when something feels a little bit off for me. And I understand that it's okay not to always be okay. And I know what to do next. That's how change happens across the industry, one honest conversation at a time, one tool in the tool belt at a time. And the ripple effect of that can be enormous. When women in ag feel equipped to talk about mental health, entire families and communities become safer and more open to talking about it. And here I want to put in another call to action. Let's send in the men. They benefit greatly from taking an In the Know training, for knowing how to talk about mental health, for having that tool in their tool belt as well, to make sure that their partners, their wives, their families are getting the best type of literacy that they can when it comes to mental health conversations. Sorry. So after we launched In the Know, something unexpected happened. Mental health professionals and general practitioners started calling us saying, we serve farmers, we want to continue to help farmers, but we don't always know how to engage them, keep them in the room, and support them in an ongoing way when it comes to their mental health. That was the spark for CALP, which is the Canadian Agricultural Literacy Program. This is a national training program that gives counselors and therapists, general practitioners, nurse practitioners who work in rural settings an inside look at farming, not just the business side of farming, but the emotional landscape as well. So the weather pressures, the family dynamics, identity that's tied to the work of a farmer, language that is typically used, physical signs and symptoms that may be manifesting when there is a mental health struggle. Because let's be honest, and we've heard it before, when a farmer goes into an office of a therapist or a general practitioner and gets the advice of you really need to take a week or two off of your job, they've lost the farmers' trust there. They've lost how they can be helpful. So kelp is just a simple way that professionals can become more agriculturally literate. It helps professionals meet farmers where they're at so that help feels safe and practical. And through word of mouth, we can get more farmers seeking help. And for women in agriculture, this is huge. Women are often the ones encouraging their partners, their kids, their parents, or employees to reach out for help. They're usually the first point of contact. And when they finally do reach out for help themselves, they really deserve someone who understands their world, understands the culture and the identity of being a woman who farms. Through KELP, we're creating a national network of mental health providers who can walk alongside farmers, not ahead, not above, but with them. One of the proudest moments over the last few years for me and my career at CCAW was announcing the launch of the National Farmer Wellness Network, which includes the National Farm Crisis Line. It's Canada's first nationwide crisis support line created specifically for farmers and farm families, available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. It's free, it's confidential, and most importantly, when a farmer calls, they're speaking with someone who's been trained in agriculture through our KELP program. I would encourage you all to save this phone number in your phone, to have it available should it be necessary for you or someone you love, someone you work with. Please make sure that you have access here. Because when you're in crisis, you should not have to spend the first 10 minutes explaining why, as a farmer, you can't just take a break during harvest or can't just stop working with your family, or what it means to really be a farmer in Canada and what that pressure really feels like. For women in ag, this service has become a lifeline. I have personally heard from several women who have said that they've called for themselves, for others, and because they weren't sure where to go, what to do, didn't know how to help, or if help was appropriate for their partner, their child, or a hired hand who was struggling at the time. They didn't want to burden anyone. They just needed someone safe to talk to, someone to ask questions of, to look at the landscape of what's available in terms of services from someone who understood. And that's what this crisis line provides. We're not just offering a crisis response here, we're building a national infrastructure of care that can be accessed by farm men and women. The National Farmer Wellness Network connects the organizations across provinces who are delivering KELP-trained, boots-on-the-ground counseling services. We can connect them through the crisis line, and it also connects them to each other through CCAW, where these folks who are delivering services can connect to share successes and challenges that they've faced delivering services to farmers, to learn from each other and make sure that services are up to date, they're appropriate, and they're timely for farmers across the country. They make sure that farmers have access to care, sometimes outside of regular business hours, whether they be by the phone. They understand that sometimes when there's nice weather outside, a farmer needs to cancel an appointment and reschedule for another day because they just can't get away at that point. There has to be flexibility in care and real literacy so that folks can access care. Finally, this is a service that recognizes the emotional labor that women in agriculture have been carrying for generations for our industry, acknowledges and celebrates that, and can help when these women are calling in. Another thing that farming teaches us is that you can do everything right and still face a storm that you had no idea that was coming. Whether that is a drought, a disease, flood, or fire, these events ripple far beyond financial loss for farmers. They impact identity, family dynamics, and mental health in ways that linger long after a cleanup is actually done on the farm. So that's why we developed our catastrophic events toolkits. They're practical, easy to use guides that help both farmers and community responders know what to do next, not just with logistics, but the human side and mental health side of recovery from a disaster. They include conversation scripts, resource lists, and protocols for reaching out after a loss. Because we know when disaster strikes, people don't always have the energy to go look for information. They really need it available at their fingertips, and they need it now. For women in ag, these moments often bring an extra layer of pressure and responsibility burden. Women tend to step into emotional triage mode. They support everyone. They support their children, their partners, employees, all while managing their own grief and stress of a catastrophic event. These toolkits give structure and permission to ask for help, to share responsibility, and to take a breath without guilt. Because resilience isn't about pushing through alone. It's about having a plan, a community, and compassion ready when it's really needed the most. Now, with the support of an Impact Canada grant, we're currently piloting the expansion of these kits to include training for a crisis liaison to have boots on the ground support for farm families, which will particularly alleviate undue stress placed upon women during a farm crisis. When I think about the strength of Canadian agriculture, the infrastructure of Canadian ag, I picture women. Women who are up before dawn, balancing chores, spreadsheets, school drop offs. Women who are quietly running their operations, they're leading boards, they sit on boards of directors, managing the books, checking on their neighbors, and still finding energy to show up for everybody else. These women are the infrastructure of agriculture. They're not just part of the system, they really are the system here. But somewhere along the way, we've really normalized the idea that being strong means being quiet, that resilience means doing all of these things well without asking for support, without needing to acknowledge a mental health struggle, and doing it on your own quietly. And that's where we really want to call attention to and draw the line there. Because strength isn't always about how much you can carry. It's about knowing that you should not have to do these things alone without any supports. And that's why we're doing the work that we're doing at CCAW. And that's why it matters so much to agriculture and particularly women. When women have access to tools, they thrive. When women have access to understanding and safe spaces in their community, it doesn't just help women. It transforms families, businesses, and their communities. When women thrive, they're supported, resourced, recognized. Agriculture doesn't just function better, it flourishes there. Whenever I speak at a workshop or a conference, I always leave with a pocket full of new stories or quiet conversations in hallways, emails that arrive to me weeks later, women telling me things that maybe they haven't said before or haven't had an opportunity to talk about before with peers. They say, I didn't realize how much I was carrying until somebody actually asked me about it. Or I thought burnout was just a regular feeling when you're a farmer. Or I'm not looking for somebody to fix my mental health. I just want someone who understands what it's like. These types of conversations are so important and they always stay with me. They remind me that programs like In the Know or the National Farmer Wellness Network aren't just necessarily services, they can be lifelines for folks across the country. They give women permission to breathe, to name what's hard, and to stop apologizing for needing to reach out for support. And what's powerful is that every time one of these women speaks up, talks about these things openly, talks about them to me or others, they really open the door for others to do the same thing. And this is how cultural change begins. And it's been happening over the last several years when it comes to farmer mental health. It doesn't begin with a campaign, but with these conversations. With one woman saying to another, this is what my experience was, and I am open to hearing about yours. And someone letting them know that they're not alone. It's the kind of leadership that women in ag model every single day. It's quiet and courageous and transformational leadership that's changing the face of our industry. making sure that we have easy, accessible supports for folks who are struggling with their mental health is imperative to make sure that we're headed in the right direction as an industry. So, as we look ahead, our focus isn't just on expansion, it's also on representation. So, the next phase of CCAW's work is about making sure women's experiences are not an afterthought in agricultural research or programming when it comes to mental health, that they're really part of the blueprint of these things. We're growing our national crisis line and outreach network to reach more women in rural and remote communities, the ones who hold the emotional heartbeat of ag, but often have the fewest access to supports. We're continuing to expand in the know and kelp so that more folks, whether they're producers, farm partners, advisors, people who work with farmers, feel equipped to start conversations about mental health and lead change in their regions. We're also diving deeper into gender informed research, looking at how things like caregiving, financial strain, and identity uniquely intersect for women in agriculture. And we're building partnerships with other women's networks and industry leaders to make sure that this movement has reach and staying power in Canadian ag. So the future for agriculture isn't just about how much we yield and what we're doing. It's also about the folks who are growing that food, the women who keep the lights on, the books balanced, the families grounded, and the communities connected. They're a force here. So that's where we're going next. If there's one thing I hope you can take from today, it's that you're not alone in this work in the mental health space. The beauty of agriculture has always been the sense of community. The community shows up when there's a fire, when a neighbor's hurt, or when someone needs help. We know that. But somewhere along the way, we forgot that emotional crises or mental health struggles deserve the same urgency as physical ones do. We don't need to be tougher. We need to be together and make sure that that support continues to show up and that services continue to develop and flourish and are supported by the community. Every time that you reach out to a friend, every time you ask, how are you doing really? Every time you share your own story, you have a conversation, you come to a presentation like this, you reach out after, you connect with somebody, that's what it means to be strong. And especially for women in ag, that kind of leadership and emotional leadership is really powerful to the industry and to the community. Women really are the pulse of this industry, and I'm so honored to have the opportunity to sit at the same virtual table as all of you today to talk about it. And together we can make sure that caring for ourselves as women in agriculture and caring for each other is not the exception, but a real standard when it comes to mental health care in Canada. Thank you so much for being here and the work that you do every single day, whether you're running a farm or raising a family, managing a team, holding a community together. You are the reason that this work really, really matters. I'm so proud to stand alongside so many incredible women who are shaping the future of ag, not by pushing harder, but with leading with care and, and compassion. Together, we're really redefining what it means to be strong. And I really believe that when we care for the people that feed us, we are feeding the future of our industry. And I want to make sure that I left a lot of time for questions and conversation because of how important it is. So I would be honored to answer any questions, have any discussion when it comes to this important topic.
Briana, thank you so much for your presentation. I myself can just hear the care that you have for farmers in your voice and in the work that you and the folks at CCAW are doing. I'm curious, as someone, I myself didn't grow up in agriculture. I'm a relative newbie to the industry. What has been the most surprising thing for you when it comes to farmers and their mental health?
That's a great question.
It's a big one.
Um, it's a big one, and I could think of a few answers, but I think I think one of the most surprising things was when I entered the industry and I was relatively new. I always worked in, psychiatric epidemiology and mental health. So none of that was new to me. My biggest surprise came from how willing folks were to talk to me about their mental health. Uh, when you get in group settings, it can be tricky and it can be hard. But when talking to farmers one on one at their kitchen tables, they were so willing to describe their mental health experiences, whether they would use the language mental health or something else. Folks cared so much about their neighbors and their communities that they were willing to talk about what the community was experiencing. And they really put a call to action to get resources available. And I thought maybe we'd be met with a little bit less openness. And I was pleasantly surprised with how open folks were to talk to us about those things.
I love that you said that. And truly, it's funny to me because when I think of my life before agriculture and the work that I was doing, uh, coming into agriculture and seeing essentially what the mental health crisis has been, uh, when you're asking folks one on one, they might not have the language that maybe some other industries would have, but essentially we're talking about the same thing. And
Yes.
that, language barrier when we're talking about a PTO or something that's going wrong on your seed or calving season, anything like that, somebody in the city might not know what you're talking about, but we could be talking about the same thing. So it's very interesting how things intertwine. Folks in the audience, we have so much time for questions, and you've been asking great ones. Um, I have a question for you here: is what can uh, what mental health resources are available currently for women who are on the farm?
Yes. So, like I mentioned in the presentation, there is the 24/7 crisis line that is available to women across the country, no matter where you are or what time it is. And then when it comes to in person services, that will depend a lot on where you're located. There are many provinces that have farm tailored counselors available, kelp trained folks who are available to deliver either no or low cost mental health services. But again, that would depend on what province you're in. I would encourage folks to go to our website. We have them listed there. So you'd be able to kind of click by province to see what is available to you. Um, and that's for more ongoing one on one style of services. Other things that maybe aren't an interventional service, but preventative services, like I said, there's ag, um, mental health literacy training that's been tailored for farmers that I think is just such a good first step for folks who want to learn a little bit more about mental health, learn a little bit more about how it might present for themselves as someone who farms or someone that they work with or love that's a farmer. I really feel like it's an integral first step in learning about ag literacy, or not ag literacy, mental health literacy. And we encourage everyone to take a session of In the Know. That is available virtually and in person. Again, I would encourage folks to go to the website. There are many peer groups that exist across the country as well. And there are many peer groups that exist and other kind of groups that exist to talk about mental health when you just want to talk one on one with a peer. But at CCW, we kind of focus on those evidence based services.
There was a question asked earlier about the National Farmer Crisis Line. Is it offered in other languages besides English?
Yes, so it is bilingual service. They also offer services in Spanish.
Amazing. I had put the link earlier in the chat for the crisis line, along with the number in the chat. So be sure you mark that down, save it in your cell phone for when you're busy out in the field. Um, Question came in here. As someone who has experienced a few farm crises, how do we get more involved to help others and become more involved?
Okay, so I guess I have a bit of a follow-up clarification question: to get more involved to help others during a farm crisis, or to just get involved so you can help in terms of folks' mental health? I guess I could answer both of those questions if that's easiest. When it comes to a farm crisis itself, again, I think the very first step would be to taken in the know, to know, have that baseline knowledge of mental health is the very best first step you can do. If you've done that already, depending again where you are in the country, there are other programs that exist, like for example the Guardian program in Ontario, where you can learn a little bit more. It's kind of a second step and can be listed as a helper in your community. When it comes to farm crisis specifically, again, that might be a regional approach, but being able to speak about mental health, your own experiences during a farm crisis, and what helped for you is going to be helpful. And then when it comes specifically to, say, the crisis liaison program, if you want to reach out, we'd love to hear your experiences to help inform the development of new programming.
Very good. So you had mentioned earlier about the studies that are being done in the gender-based differences when it comes to mental health. Um, what specifically are you able to share with us about the research that is being done?
Yeah, I can't go too in depth in any of the unpublished or unfinished projects, but what kind of the trajectory there was, the survey data showed that men and women are experiencing mental health differently on the farm. And then from there, doing some qualitative work to see what does that look like? What is that experience like? And coming through with some of those themes that I talked about, workload, unpaid labor, kin keeping. Those are areas where we can dive a little deeper and see what we can do, or what are points of intervention that could happen to help alleviate some of the extra stress that women are experiencing in ag. And some of that is looking at the language that we use when we're developing agricultural campaigns, the access to for women to be included on things like boards or in positions of power. Are there barriers to those things? How do we eliminate some of those barriers? What simple language changes can we make when we are writing articles or creating campaigns, so that women see themselves in the farm more easily, and so that men and others see women when they think of farming? Those are all things that we can do without putting more on women to give their time and contribution. So we're kind of thinking of starting there and then developing out.
Absolutely. Question here is, what can men do to support farming women's mental health?
I love that question. I guess a couple the things that I just mentioned as well. Um, Language is important. Acknowledging the contributions of women on the farm is a simple way to do that. Again, creating spaces for women in those rooms, around those board tables, and making sure that women's voices are heard and taken seriously. Making sure that when you're recruiting for a board, you think about how many women are sitting at this table, and making space for that. I think when a big thing that men can do is learn more about mental health. Let's make sure that men are prepared, that they have literacy when it comes to their mental health and others' mental health, so that there can be a partnership there to be able to recognize signs and symptoms, and that men can contribute to that in a meaningful way, so that the onus isn't put on women to take mental health trainings to understand mental health more deeply. Let's make sure that men who farm are also understanding these things and making a commitment to learning more about mental health, so that they understand their own signs and symptoms of the struggle, and the women that they farm with as well, so that there can be kind of equal partnership there.
Love that. I think even thinking of my own personal experience and I have a notebook of all of the quotable things that you said during your presentation, that if we don't name it, then we can't change it.
Mhm.
And being strong doesn't mean being quiet. So keeping all of these things to ourselves, to be the shoulder to cry on, essentially for, either our husbands or our fathers or men in our industry, can be quite a load to carry. Um,
Yes.
what suggestions do you have for women who maybe feel this, that don't feel like they can speak out?
Reach out. Reach out for help. If you don't feel like you can speak up in the spaces that you're in, reach out to the line so that you can be connected to somebody. Like I said, if you want to connect with an in the know session, so you can connect with other folks who are learning about mental health, there is always a way to reach out and have space to be heard. And like I said, if that can't happen in your own space, in your job, or in your home, there are places to reach out to. And the simplest and easiest one might be to call that line, that crisis line, and get more information about what's going on in your area. A safe, confidential conversation where you can explore how that is making you feel and how that's impacting you and what you might be able to do about it, to then maybe give yourself more tools to be able to have those conversations in spaces where you haven't had them before. And if anyone wants to have conversations about that, and about any of this type of work, they can always reach out to me too, and I could guide them to another resource.
Yeah. I think it's important to say, you said it so eloquently before, but we're not alone in this. We're not alone in the feelings that we've had. It might not have been talked about and the language might not have been used in generations previously, but we've all gone through this and we've all experienced something. And we all have mental health. And it's just, if we need that extra support, it's there for us now. And I think in agriculture, we are so lucky to have all of the resources and the people doing the hard work to bring this to light, to support the people who feed us. So it's amazing.
Mhm.
Um, Question here is, do you have resources for when you lose a parent, who could have also been your business partner?
Mm. We don't at CCW. I don't have specific resources on grief. This is also something that definitely could be discussed with a counselor, not necessarily a crisis counselor, but someone who could provide ongoing support and some tools. I think that going to someone that has that CALP training or is farm literate would be so important here, because there's such a unique relationship with working with family, losing a family member, and kind of legacy of the farm and identity that can be tied up in that. It can be a really unique experience. So I would encourage anyone to reach out. Again, you can find what provincial resources are available on our website, or you can reach out through the line and get that information as well. But I think having a conversation with someone who understands farming would be really, really important there.
Absolutely. Another quotable moment that somebody shared with us is, we don't need to be stronger, we need to be together. And I think that's super important, especially, heading into our busier seasons here on the farm, when we can be in a barn or in a field all by ourselves. Knowing that there are resources available to us just through our little phone here,
Mhm.
depending on your cell reception, of course.
Yeah.
But just having those resources available, and just to speak to people, I think is super important. So again, save that crisis line in your phone, friends, and save the links to the websites that have been shared somewhere in a notes app, because they can be really useful resources when we're in our busy season and we can kind of forget to take care of ourselves.
Yes. And I want to just add to that and say, and knowing that those feelings are so normal and they are not necessarily an individual experience. It's happening to you in that moment, but also there are so many others that are experiencing those feelings as well. We are not alone in that. And yes, there are specific stressors and specific moments in farming that can be incredibly stressful, and get yourself kind of up here, and you need to be able to talk about that, and having that phone number in there and knowing this is a normal conversation, this is a normal physiological response, this is a normal process, and I need to reach out to someone to be able to properly handle that. We do such a good job of stepping up in moments where someone experiences an injury. We need to be able to step up in the same way for a mental health struggle.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's also fair to say, you know, we had mentioned before, talking about this can be kind of doom and gloom, but also let's celebrate it. You know, we've
Mhm.
made it through these hard times. You know, when you bring in the harvest and the grain is in the bin or the calves are on the ground and they're healthy, let's celebrate those things too together, because I think farming can be so stressful, but you know, also we live such a neat, cool life. And this is coming from
Mhm.
somebody who didn't grow up in agriculture. And now I get to say I drive a combine for a living. Like that's way cooler than a
Mhm.
minivan to me. Like we get to do these really cool things. So let's celebrate that together too.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's a very good point as well. And celebrating the wins of, we now have services in place for farming specifically. That did not exist 10 years ago. That's a huge win as well. We're having conversations about mental health where people are open to discussing it. That's a big win as well. Checking in on someone's mental health after you finish a harvest and you're like, yeah, grain's in the bin. How are we all doing? That's a win. So continuing to talk about these things and celebrating those wins is super important.
Absolutely. Can we go back to more information on the kelp program and where people can find more information about that online?
Yeah, sure. So again, if you go to CCAW's website, which is just ccaw.ca, you can find information on all of these programs. CALP specifically, the Canadian Agriculture Literacy Program, is a training that is for mental health professionals, nurse practitioners, GPs who are working in rural spaces and working with farmers specifically. So it's not a training for farmers or folks who work with farmers in an advisory capacity, but it is for folks who deliver mental health services or medical services to farmers to better understand what it is like to be a farmer and how a mental health struggle may present from a farmer.
Absolutely. And coming from personal experience and seeing this play out for farmers who are seeking assistance and seeking help, perhaps from professionals that don't really understand agriculture. For instance,
Mhm.
you know, telling somebody that they need 8 hours of sleep at night, they need to exercise for 30 minutes a day during the busiest, most stressful time of year is probably not the most helpful advice. So
Yeah.
having a mental health professional able to understand what your stressors are is super important. And I will say this too, if you have reached out before and you experienced what I mentioned, you know, the 8 hours of sleep, get healthy meals, whatever it is, and that didn't work for you, reach out again.
Mhm.
The help that you've received the first time might not be the help that you need, but the help you need is out there.
Yes, that is such a good point. And I would also say, even if you reach out to someone who is kelp trained and they are farm literate, you may not click with them.
Mhm.
You can't always click with every person that you reach out to, any counselor, any doctor, a crisis worker. It is possible that it just doesn't feel quite right. Try again, ask for a referral. That is totally normal and a totally normal experience. You can't always get it right on the first try. Just like when you're making friends or having conversations with some people, you really click, others, it just doesn't really work well. You keep going. So please, yeah, that's such a great point, Caitlin. Thank you for bringing that up. And I just wanted to share that that's also true when you're working with a counselor. It might not always be the right fit the first time.
Yep. Keep trying again. I always compare it to speed dating or your first date. It might not be the
Yeah.
one. Keep trying,
Yes.
you'll find the one.
That's exactly right, and you will find the right fit there. Um, and I get that it can be hard to reach out even just the first time, so I understand that. So I would just really encourage folks to keep trying.
Yeah, absolutely. There was another comment on here. Ask friends who they see. I
Yes.
love asking for a good referral from some
Hmm.
folks too. So yeah, it's very good.
Absolutely.
Um, One of the last questions in here is, are the um, in the know sessions available online?
Yes, they are. They're offered online and in person. So if there isn't one coming up soon, there will be one coming up virtually in the future. So you can join a mailing list on our website to know when the next virtual session will be held. And then, depending again on your region, you can sign up to receive word if there's going to be an in-person one as well.
I believe there was a question earlier in the chat too for folks who are interested in maybe hosting an in-person for
Yep.
their community or for a group that they're a part of. Are they able to reach out and ask for those as well?
Yes, absolutely. You can reach out to me, and I can get you in touch with the right person at CCAW. Or again, if you want to go through the website, you can do that as well and get connected.
Awesome. So obviously, CCAW website is a great resource to have for folks who are looking to reach out to you specifically. Where can they contact you online?
Yeah, they can email me at bhagan@ccaw.ca, or if they want to find me on social media, they can do that too, or CCAW and reach out that way. I'm always available to talk about any of these things.
Awesome. Amazing. Brianna, I can tell the heart and passion in your voice and what you're doing. And from myself, a grain farmer in Alberta, I thank you for the work that you're doing. It is needed. We appreciate you and all of the work that you're doing. Any closing thoughts or remarks that you want to leave our audience with today?
I guess I just want to reiterate that, the work we're doing at CCAW could not be done with the active participation of people who farm in Canada. So I want to thank everyone for participating in those things and knowing that we are in your corner and developing these evidence based services for you, with you, and that if you are struggling, there is someone out there who is ready to help you. Please reach out for help. No problem is too big or too small. Reach out to the crisis line, get connected to an ongoing service. There is help there.
Amazing. Dr. Hagan, thank you so much for sharing all of your wisdom with us today. I truly appreciate it. And we couldn't do it without you. So thank you.
Thanks very much.
Well, friends, thank you so much for your participation today and for being here. That does it for our time here today. And I hope you are all able to take away some actionable insights that will give you confidence when choosing to focus on your own mental health and the wellness of your farm. You will be receiving a link today to the recording. In just a couple days in your inbox. You will also be receiving an email shortly in your inbox with an evaluation form. So please fill that out for FCC. Your feedback helps them plan future events and hopefully bring back this amazing women's series. If you missed the other 10 episodes that we've had, they're all uploaded on FCC's YouTube page, so you can find those there. On behalf of FCC, thank you all so much for joining us here today. We truly appreciate it and have the best rest of your day.